Good evening, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching World Talks, where every word matters. Leaders of Hungary, Slovakia and Serbia met on Tuesday to discuss their version of anti-migration policy in Europe. Viktor Orbán, Robert Fico and Aleksandar Vučić all believe the EU should allocate more money to protect its external borders. And to discuss the issue, we're joined by Krzysztof Jaworski from the Institute for Security and International Development. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for accepting our invitation. So, what are the two EU member states, I'm talking of course about Hungary and Slovakia, trying to achieve by organizing a meeting on migration? And can such meetings persuade Brussels to change its stance on the migration policy the EU is conducting right now?
This third member of this meeting, Serbia, is indeed interesting companion for two European Union member states. And it seems that what Hungary and Slovakia are trying to achieve is to propose their own counterbalance for actively proposed measures, especially by Poland, which is a recent proposition to suspend asylum right and to actively prevent inflow of people at external EU border, which was announced by Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk. And if we consider the party and the political orientation both of Robert Fico as well as Viktor Orbán, it seems that they are trying to keep their advantage of being parties opposed to migration. And now when the EU mainstream is shifting toward harder stance in the topic of migration, they're trying to be even more strict, even more polarized against this EU mainstream. So if mainstream is moving, they need to move even further, to radicalize even further, to keep their political advantage, to keep their election, to keep their polls gains.
Right, and I'd like to ask you about, I think it was Viktor Orbán's idea concerning the relocation of migrants back to Africa, and the proposed solution is to send them back to their countries of origin. Now, I'm wondering whether the three gentlemen who met today mean to send Syrians back to the war zone, or people from Afghanistan back to the Taliban. So what's this proposal about exactly?
Yes, that's right. These are extreme cases like Syria, where there is still obvious that it isn't a safe country, it isn't a safe state, and people who are refugees from Syria cannot be safe in their country of origin. It is the same with Afghanistan. But at the same time, if they are trying to achieve this very strict, very radical stance, which is helping them to differ from the shifting EU mainstream, such propositions are helping them to achieve this goal. So when it comes to relocating people to countries of origin, it is now broadly discussed. However, it should be really taken really carefully, because it is the most difficult, the hardest thing with this migration management, that these are people and we have our own principles. We should try to not to violate human rights. So at the same time, with trying to achieve this control of migration by any means that are along human rights, we should at the same time be careful not to violate our own principles. And I think, as I said, that Hungary or Slovakia, in this case, it is in favor of their political stance to use such radicalized arguments to make it even harder for these EU mainstream to make their own stance, being taken seriously by people who are afraid of migration.
The three aforementioned leaders clearly advocate for their sort of migration policy, stating that it clearly works. And let me quote here Robert Fico. He said, "We were right when we said very clearly at the beginning of the migration crisis that the basis for the fight against illegal migration is the protection of external EU borders," while Aleksandar Vučić added that the strict anti-migration policy saw 80% migrants less this year than in... I guess that refers to 2023, not in 2022. Now, for an outside observer, as we already said, it may seem that actually the three countries, well, the two EU countries plus one, namely Serbia, is trying to take a similar approach to Poland or Germany lately, as we see how the migration policy is rapidly changing. But those are two totally different ideas for dealing with the illegal migration, aren't they?
That's right. And what is more, Prime Minister Orbán said that there is only one working model of dealing with a problem of irregular migration, and it is, of course, a Hungarian model where anyone can enter Hungary only after being allowed to, not in the opposite way. First, getting into Hungary and then being discussed whether he is allowed to stay here or not. Because if he is already there, it is much harder to send him back. Mm-hmm. So yes, it is some of these measures that Hungary or Slovakia is saying that it is useful, or it is or these countries used it before. These are measures which are indeed effective. And the question is how to balance it with human rights, with our own principles, with our law, with European Union solidarity as well. And you mentioned Germany, and Germany isn't helping because Germany is acting on its own. Germany blocked its borders without consultations with its neighbors. And Germany is at the same time, but by this move, fueling such arguments which Orbán or Fico are using, because, of course, they have their own interests, they have their own political goals, and such acts as this acting on its own by Germany is helping them to present themselves as those who were always right and those who have this solution for this migration problem.
Mm-hmm. Now, Albania is successfully cooperating with Italy in regard of illegal migration by hosting migrants in camps on the territory. Hosting is a fancy word for keeping them there. Now, why wouldn't Aleksandar Vučić agree for such a solution on the Serbian soil?
I believe that we can look at this at two dimensions, and one is its internal politics of Serbia, and I believe that such stance is helping him to gain support of Serbian people, which can be proud that their leader is taking strong stance, that isn't allowing to repeat something they see as bad politics of many European countries that allowed many people to get into these countries, and now they have problems with effectively managing what these people are doing. That's one problem. And the second thing I believe is that by taking this stance, he is as well fueling radical parties all around Europe by showing again by his own example that it is possible to take such a hard stance and by giving these parties, their supporters, argument to demand stronger stance of parties in the...
Right, there is a common denominator for the three leaders who met today. Well, there's the Kremlin, obviously, right? all three countries have rather warm relations with Vladimir Putin. Now, it's maybe a long shot, but wouldn't you say that a third country actor was also somehow involved in this initiative we saw today in Slovakia?
It is hard to make such stance solely on speculation, so I won't give a definite answer. However, it is reasonable to exercise this way of reasoning in this matter, and we can make it even further, because it is of course important, these nuances when it comes to balancing both security and control over migration and human rights and our principles. It is of course important. The context is important, so we can have similarly at the first glance very similar approaches. For example, what now Poland is proposing and what Hungary said it is going to do. And at the same time, this stance of Hungary with this whole context we discussed now, it equals fueling radical parties, and it equals probably the risk of a decline of European integration. And this is, of course, in favor of Russia.
Of course, it is serving Moscow's interests. Krzysztof Jaworski from the Institute for Security and International Development was our guest this evening. Thank you so much, Krzysztof. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you for watching. And of course, stay with us for much more here on TVP World.